So hello guys, gals and non-binary pals, welcome to another episode of TopTenz. I am your host for this episode, Karl Smallwood, reporting to you from an undisclosed location somewhere in the UK that also happens to contain my bed. And today we're talking about 10 amazing animal superpowers. So humans are incredible creatures, capable of dominating the world thanks to our unmatched brain power, language, cooperation and opposable thumbs that lets us stunt on our animal bros by telling them boo. But the animal kingdom is no slouch when it comes to showing off. For example, consider the following list of animal abilities that some street level superheroes would have trouble replicating, let alone besting. Starting with number 10, the pistol shrimp kills prey with an underwater sonic boom. Do you know in Street Fighter there's some characters who can just straight up shoot balls of energy from their fists, and how unfair that must be for all the people in that game who can't do that? And that's probably how the prey of the pistol shrimp feels, a kick-ass crustacean that's basically scuttling around the ocean floor with the organic equivalent of a howitzer strapped to its tiny little claws. Clocking in at just about 4 centimetres long and weighing a hefty 25 grams, these unassuming little guys are able to kill, maim and stun prey many sizes larger than themselves by doing little more than snapping their claws shut really fast. So fast, in fact, that experts trying to film them with cameras that captured in excess of 50,000 frames per second saw nothing but a blur, with the team behind that experiment ultimately having to use cameras that could capture up to 300,000 frames per second just to see what was going on when the pistol shrimp decided it didn't need to sugarcoat it. Without getting too technical about what's going on here, the sheer speed with which the shrimps close their claws causes the water in front of them to near instantly heat up to about 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit, causing it to boil away and leave behind a bubble which rapidly dissipates the heat and energy into the surrounding water when it pops, which normally, we should point out, is filled with whatever the pistol shrimp is attacking at that time. What makes this extra terrifying though is that it happens in a fraction of a second, so quickly in fact that the things that the shrimp often attacks don't really have chance to even register what's happening to them. And remember, it does this through sheer concussive force, so it's less like a Hadouken and more like Joe in anime where characters will just punch or move so fast the air in front of them catches fire and becomes just a concussive force in its own right. Moving on, number 9, the immortal jellyfish has infinite lives. With a couple of noteworthy exceptions, most every animal is one that we humans could beat by simply, just waiting for it to die as we watch reruns of Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares on Netflix or whatever. Hell, there's even a theory that this is exactly how early man hunted big game, by following it until it died of exhaustion, a theory known as persistence hunting. Neither of these things would work on the immortal jellyfish because its name suggests it cannot die. To be clear, you could still step on it or slap it with a tennis racket or put it in a blender or something, but in ideal conditions with plenty of food, the immortal jellyfish could theoretically live forever, we think. Technically, the jellyfish has what's known as an indefinite lifespan, which is nerd talk for we have no real idea how long this thing could live before it dies of old age. A surprisingly common thing in the animal kingdom because not many animals get a chance to die of natural causes, unless you consider being eaten by another animal because they're too old and slow to run away to be natural causes. Anyway, the immortal jellyfish possesses an uncanny ability to, seemingly at will, revert into a polyp, its younger form, essentially resetting its biological clock, and as far as we're aware, it can do this an infinite amount of times, whenever the hell it really feels like it. For example, the environment has no food, turn into a polyp, lost a tentacle, turn into a polyp and regrow it. No other jellyfish around to mate with? No worries, just turn back into a jellyfish teenager and try again. Why am I jealous of a jellyfish? Anyway, number 8. The male lyrebird can copy a chainsaw. Everyone knows that parrots can, parrot things, but their ability to mimic sounds they hear is dwarfed by that of the Australian superb lyrebird, a creature with an astonishing and some would say worrying capacity for mimicry. Well, the males do at least anyway. Like many birds, the superb lyrebird develops its skills to get laid, but unlike other birds who waste time writing their own songs, the lyrebird just covers them, often better than the original singer. Think Gary Jules with a cover of Mad World or Johnny Cash's version of Hurt, or by combining them with the sounds of other birds and creatures. So a remix, which is all well and good, but you wanted to hear about a chainsaw bird, so let's talk about that now. So in addition to being able to mimic the many sounds of the forest, the lyrebird is able to mimic almost unerringly accurately the sounds of man-made objects. These include, but are not limited to, things like car alarms, the sound of cameras, shutters going off when people take pictures in the wild, and the human voice to a limited extent. But perhaps the most distressing example of a thing a superb lyrebird is able to mimic is the sound of a chainsaw, and hopefully we can put in a clipping of this from the David Attenborough documentary where they showcase it. And a little bonus fact here, because it's often portrayed as that lyrebird, even in the documentary itself, as that's the lyrebird mimicking the sounds of deforestation, which there are examples of, but that particular example of the superb lyrebird was in a zoo. And the sounds it's copying are the sounds of deforestation, but the sounds of the renovations being made to a nearby enclosure, which is still impressive and terrifying, because I do not like the idea of there being Australian chainsaw birds out there. Not sure about anybody else. Number 7, the hairy frog makes Wolverine claws. Does anyone remember that scene in the first X-Men movie where Wolverine unsheathes his claws to punch a shotgun in half, and then to make small talk, Rogue asks him if it hurts when he does that, and he responds, "Every time." Yeah, there's a frog out there that understands this intimately. Known as the hairy frog for what I assume would be pretty obvious reasons, with the picture that's going to be on screen somewhere right now, this modestly sized amphibian sports a remarkable defensive adaptation right out of the comic books, bone claws. Specifically, almost exactly like Wolverine, when threatened, the frog will snap several bones within its hands. It's a frog, but its feet, and it will then force these bones out through the gaps in its toe pads, much like Wolverine. And the frog can then jab at or slash at a predator's eyes with these claws, often spraying them with blood in the process, because it seemingly wants to really be on an Iron Maiden album cover at some point. And while the frog itself is relatively small, clocking in at about 10 centimeters long, hunters in its native Cameroon know to only hunt them with spears so they don't get stabbed. An image I would like people to just let sit in their minds for a moment now. A large man, armed with a spear, squaring off against a small frog. And we all know in that situation, the frog has kind of won, even if it dies, because the fact it's made something 400 times its own size hesitate means it's won in every way that matters, right? Number 6. The hero shrew is stomp-proof. So I hate to bring this up, but there's a scene in the film The Green Mile where the arsehole guard steps on Mr. Jingles, and Michael Clarke Duncan has to bring him back to life with prison magic. If Mr. Jingles had not been a mouse and instead been a hero shrew, that wouldn't have been necessary. In fact, it's likely that Mr. Jingles could have survived being elbow dropped by Michael Clarke Duncan himself. We say this because the hero, or armoured shrew, is basically immune to being stepped on thanks to an evolutionary adaptation, believed to help the shrew force its way beneath large logs when scooting around the forest floor looking for bugs and the like. Specifically, the shrew has a massive, relative to its size, spine that is, and I quote, 4 times as robust as any other mammal its size, which allows the seemingly shrew to avoid being crushed by things hundreds of times its size and weight. Something that the Banjbetu people of the Republic of Congo actively take advantage of to freak out Westerners and white people, usually by standing on one before removing their foot and showing that it isn't wholly unharmed as it scoots off into the forest, which, as party tricks go, is actually kind of cool. Number 5. Great white sharks can never be held captive. Okay, so this one's less a superpower and more an observable phenomenon that's really weird. So have you ever stopped and thought about how, despite their popularity as the shark everybody knows, like it's the one from Jaws, no aquarium on Earth has never had a great white shark in one of their tanks. Like, not even a small one. And here's the thing, nobody knows why we can't do that. Keep in mind, it's not to do with the animal's size, as bigger sharks and indeed bigger marine creatures have been kept in captivity. Whether they're happy or not is another story, but aquariums across the world have successfully kept whales and whale sharks, which are much bigger than great white sharks on average, in captivity for years, if not decades. For comparison's sake, no aquarium has ever successfully kept a great white shark in captivity for longer than a few days. The sole known exception to this being the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which managed to hold on to a great white shark for just under 200 days before they had to release it because it was too sickly. And even then, this was a juvenile that basically spent all of its time being listless and sickly from day one. Again, why this is the case isn't clear. There's just something about great white sharks specifically that prevents us from capturing them, and even when they're in captivity, seasoned experts become uneasy at this fact. For example, in one case, a captive great white shark died in just 3 days after doing nothing but repeatedly headbutt the tank it was stored in. Moving on, number 4. The chiton teeth are nearly indestructible. While from a visual perspective, we kind of have to agree that the aforementioned hairy frog is the animal out there that's most similar to the Marvel hero Wolverine. But we do think the chiton, a small marine mollusk, deserves an honorary mention for sharing his indestructible skeleton. Okay, so as a mollusk, it doesn't have a skeleton, but it does have teeth. Very, very tough teeth. Teeth that are widely considered to be the single hardest biomineral known to science. This is because the creature's teeth contain something called magnetite, which is basically a kind of iron oxide, meaning these things quite literally have metal-infused teeth. See, they are kind of like Wolverine. Why, you're probably asking? Well, pretty simply, the creature spends most of its life just hoovering algae off of rocks, constantly nibbling on the stony surfaces of that they attach themselves to, which necessitates having remarkably tough chompers. Just the side effect is they can occasionally chew through the rocks that they're on. Cool. Number 3. Hummingbirds can fly backwards and upside down. Some birds can fly quite fast, others can climb quite high, but none are even half as manoeuvrable as the hummingbird, one of the most remarkable capabilities of which is its ability to fly not only forwards but backwards, a skill shared by no other bird species. They can also fly upside down, which again is something no other bird can do, except for, of course, other hummingbirds. This is partly because hummingbirds just flap their wings really, really fast, while the angle that they flap them at can be adjusted near instantly, allowing for manoeuvres human fighter pilots couldn't replicate in one of those ships from Independence Day. Now, to be clear, that's not a joke, and when a hummingbird is, and I'm sorry to be crass here, really, really horny, it's capable of some feats of aerial acrobatics, more impressive than anything a human fighter aircraft could accomplish. For example, we know of one particularly energetic hummingbird being clocked at moving, and I quote, 383 body lengths in the space of a single second, which was roughly 50 miles per hour for the hummingbird. Again, this might not sound impressive, but keep in mind a hummingbird is like this big, which means that relative to its size, it was moving thousands of miles an hour. By which I mean, if you scaled up the hummingbird, it would be moving many thousands of miles per hour. Or if you scaled down a fighter jet, the hummingbird would be moving many hundreds of times faster than it, because fighter jets, even the most advanced ones, can only move a couple of dozen body lengths in the space of a second, whereas a hummingbird can do it hundreds of times. And for the curious, this is the fastest relative acceleration for any, aerial creature we're aware of. Even the infamous peregrine falcon cannot reach acceleration speeds of that much, and it's doing it all because it wants to get laid. You go, hummingbird. Number 2. Rats can gnaw through concrete and swim for half a week. You probably have heard the old statistic that you're never more than 6 foot away from a rat, and you probably thought that that meant that there's just a lot of rats or something. But despite their unassuming appearance and the general disdain with which they're addressed or discussed, rats are amazing animals, and the fact that they're really close to you might be due to the fact nothing can really stop them from doing that. For starters, rats are surprisingly robust creatures. They can eat almost anything, which includes concrete. Okay, so they can't gain sustenance from concrete, but they can effortlessly gnaw right on through it whilst sneaking into a building. Similarly, they can slit through a gap no wider than their own head, leading to the rise of a fairly persistent myth that they have a collapsible or adjustable flexible skeleton, when in truth they can just run really fast and dart into an unseen gap or hole so quickly it merely looks like that, which is reassuring, I suppose. Rats can also hold their breath for several minutes at a time and casually tread water or swim for more than 60 hours straight. In regards to that latter fact, you've probably heard before that rats can tread water for a couple of days, but you probably don't know why we know that, and why we know that is a pretty depressing story, so I'm just going to warn everyone. So about 50 or so years ago, a researcher decided to see how long a rat could tread water for, so just chucked a bunch of them into a pool. And the total time was about 15 minutes. Then the researcher had an idea and thought, well, what about if I pull the rat out just before it drowns, clean it off, and then throw it back in again? Will the idea that it might get rescued encourage the rat to try and survive for a bit longer? Which is what happened, with the resulting rats that were thrown in, nearly drowned, rescued and then thrown back in, surviving for much longer than 15 minutes. They swam for 60 hours. Yeah, if we ever get to a point where the rats decide to rise up and take over, now you know why, and now you're not going to feel bad about it because we kind of deserve it. And finally, number 1. The archerfish is like a water cyclops. And I mean the hero Cyclops here, not Cyclopses from Greek myth. So here's a fun fact many people might not know about the Marvel hero Cyclops. The destructive ocular beams he fires from his eyes aren't hot. at all. They are pure concussive force from another dimension, said to be filled with a nigh infinite amount of ruby-coloured kinetic energy that Cyclops is able to access by simply opening his eyes. This also means that when Cyclops blasts a bad guy with his optic blast, he is, for all intents and purposes, punching them with his eyeballs. There's a fish out there that does something similar. Known fittingly as the archerfish, this small fishy is able to deftly take down prey by blasting them with a highly pressurised blast of water from its own mouth. And if anyone out there thinking that this isn't as impressive as the other things on this list, keep in mind that the fish lives underwater. The things it's hunting are not. This means that the fish has to take into account the refraction of light whilst aiming, something that it is able to do seemingly instinctually. This is again quite similar to the hero Cyclops, who as a secondary power has an innate understanding of angles and the physics of how his powers work. Furthermore, the fish can launch a volley of up to 7 blasts of water and, if all else fails, leap out of the water to body check prey in midair before scooping them up and dragging them below the water to eat them later. Badass and terrifying. But yes, I hope everybody watching at home enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed reading through it and sharing the facts that were contained therein with you folks at home. I have been your host, Karl Smallwood. You can follow me elsewhere on social media or my other channels at the link you can find below. You can like for, it helps. Clicking that like button does help. You can subscribe for more content on the list and comment with feedback or suggestions. And yeah, as I always like to say at the end of each video, go out there and have the day that you deserve. Cheers. And thanks to TopTenz for letting me resume my interim hosting duties, at least for a little while. It's very much appreciated, and I hope everyone behind the scenes has a great day.